Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Antonia Barra. Antonia Barra was born in the late 1980s into a warm and united family. Her family lived in a spacious home that comfortably accommodated. Her parents, Alejandro and Marcela, nurtured their 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son, creating a warm environment filled with care and attention. The children were generally kind and well-behaved, rarely causing trouble. However, Antonia distinguished herself from her siblings with her exceptional perceptiveness, sense of responsibility, and ambition from an early age, making her a special source of pride for her parents. Antonia was a top student who had a good relationship with her teachers and clear future goals. She dreamed of traveling and leading a fulfilling life. After graduating high school, she was accepted into her preferred university and began studying a popular major. As a freshman, she focused on mastering the fundamentals of her future career, while also engaging in social and academic events, where she made new friends who shared her interests and ambitions. One of her closest friends was Consuela Uribe, a law student. They enjoyed spending time together, going out, shopping, and attending parties. This brings them even close. Martin was born and raised in Tomoko, Chile, the same city as Antonia. He comes from a large family, including parents, a sister, and a brother. When he was young, he had a child with a woman named Daniela Alvarez, but their relationship ended shortly right after they give birth. From 2015 to 2017, Antonia and Martin communicated through a social network. At that time, Antonia was a teenager. They exchanged messages and commented on each other's photos, but their interactions were limited to online communication. Eventually, they met in person, which sadly resulted in a tragic outcome. When Antonia broke up with her boyfriend Rodrigo, Consuela suggested that she find a way to distract herself from the sadness. Struggling with the breakup, Antonia decided to take her friend's advice to help clear her mind and forget her troubles for a while. They planned a trip to celebrate Chile's Independence Day on September 18th, choosing the tourist town of Pucón as their destination. By chance, Antonia encountered Martin there. He was in Pucón to attend an electronic music festival at a local club called Black Room, where a DJ friend of his was performing. On September 17th, around 6:30 p.m., Consuela, Antonia, and 3 friends, including Consuela's boyfriend, headed to Pucón. The trip went well, and upon arrival, they stayed in different accommodations. The girls stayed at a summer house owned by the Consuela family. After 8 p.m., they started getting ready for a party at the popular venue, Black Room, which promised to be an unforgettable experience. Before leaving, Antonia messaged her father, Alejandro, who reminded her to be careful and cautious with strangers. She replied, assuring him that being prudent was her top priority. Antonia and Consuela got ready and went to the club, where they ordered food and drinks. Antonia and Martin had a great time chatting and dancing. The Black Room Club turned out to be the perfect place for their unexpected reunion. They were delighted by this chance meeting and spent the evening together, enjoying each other's company. It was clear they had a mutual affection. Antonia would occasionally join Consuela and greet the male acquaintances she had traveled with, moving between different bars. However, she didn't realize how much she had consumed. The combination of the long drive and an empty stomach contributed to her inebriation, which was unusual for her. Around 6:45 a.m., Consuela found her friend Antonia happily chatting with a mutual acquaintance, Emilio. Consuela suggested it was time to leave, but Antonia insisted on staying, feeling good and wanting to enjoy the night longer. Despite Consuela's advice to stop drinking and rethink her choice, Antonia remained determined to stay at the club while Consuela went home. This decision would later prove to be a mistake for Antonia. Emilio, who was there, became a witness to what happened next and provided details during the investigation and in court. He observed that Martin approached Antonia, started a conversation, and then took her by the hand to lead her toward the exit. Emilio noticed that Antonia was acting strangely. He wasn't sure if Antonia was participating in the conversation or simply confused by the alcohol. However, she didn't seem to mind being taken away, or maybe she didn't even realize it was happening. Emilio believed that Martin had asked her to join him and that she had agreed. However, the external surveillance footage revealed a different version of events. Martin's friends reported that they left the club in 2 cars, but there wasn't enough space for Martin and Antonia in either vehicle, so they decided to walk. As they walked, they encountered a store. Surveillance footage showed that Martin forced Antonia to go inside. She was unsteady and unable to fight back. Martin, who was a bit more sober, managed to exert some control over the situation. They were recorded on camera multiple times throughout the night. During their time together, Martin was overly affectionate and attempted to kiss Antonia, but she did not reciprocate and tried to stay away. Once they arrived at the rented house, the other friends paid little attention to she. Only Barbara, a 19-year-old who had just joined and wasn't drinking, noticed that the couple appeared to be drunk. Later, they went upstairs. Around 9 a.m., Consuela received a voice message from Antonia. At first, she found it difficult to understand the message. After listening closely, she deciphered that Antonia was asking to be picked up. Since Antonia couldn't share her exact location, Consuela used GPS to locate her. Consuela and her boyfriend, Jose, then headed to the specified location. When Consuela and Jose entered the house, they found Martin naked and using a pillow to cover himself. Consuela asked him where Antonia was, but he said he didn't know. They then went upstairs and discovered Antonia in a bedroom, lying on the bed in her underwear and quietly crying. Jose picked her up and took her to the car. Consuela asked what had happened, but Antonia could only cry sob. Consuela and Jose tried to comfort her by hugging her and encouraging her to talk. Once they arrived back at the summer house, Antonia opened up about everything. She revealed that Martin had taken advantage of her against her will, leaving her feeling helpless. Though her memories were blurry, she clearly understood that he had harmed her. This incident had taken place when they went upstairs, and afterward, he left her alone and vanished. After hearing about the incident, Jose and Consuela urged Antonia to report Martin to the police and seek justice. However, she was too afraid that her parents and the public would find out, so she decided to silently cope with her trauma and heal on her own. She asked them not to tell anyone about what happened. Then, Antonia received a message from her father checking in on her and joking about whether she had been drinking too much. To avoid raising suspicion, Consuela responded casually, which unintentionally revealed her true feelings. The next day, Antonia met with Martin to discuss what had happened, but he was dismissive and arrogant, insisting that the previous night's incidents were consensual. At that moment, Antonia understood that she would not receive the truth or an apology from him, and she knew she had to try to get through it. Antonia was suffering from intimacy trauma syndrome, which affects her physical, emotional, cognitive, and social behaviors. This condition can manifest right after a traumatic incident or even months or years later. Antonia was going through an intense phase of this syndrome alone, unable to escape feelings of distress, distraction, anxiety, and confusion, often alternating with hysterical outbursts and crying. Antonia experienced a strong desire to cleanse herself, which caused her nausea and occasional vomiting. For 3 weeks, she kept to herself and tried to behave as if everything was normal. A childhood friend remarked that they hadn't noticed anything unusual about her, but her classmates were aware of her memory loss and disorganization linked to the syndrome. One classmate noted that her grades had fallen, which was unexpected for someone who had always been a dedicated student. When asked about the cause, Antonia said that it to her poor health. Her terrible secret somehow got revealed to an ex-boyfriend, Rodrigo, but the details he received were distorted and negative. He quickly reported this to others. Antonia insisted she was not responsible for what had happened, claiming the information he had was greatly exaggerated, but he did not believe her. To make matters worse, the day before indents, Martin had called her, and it's unclear what they discussed, though it might have included threats from him. On the evening of October 13, 2019, Antonia family could never have imagined how the day would end. Carla, visiting their parents' home, went upstairs to greet her sister Antonia, expecting a simple conversation. However, when she found Antonia seemingly asleep, Carla decided not to disturb her and moved toward the door. Just before leaving, she heard Antonia ask about their mother and request the light to be turned off. After telling Carla she loved her, Antonia turned her face away. Carla thought maybe Antonia just tired or not in the mood. But she didn't know that Antonia was suffering from painful thoughts, making her feel that there was only one way to escape her suffering. By 7 p.m. that evening, Antonia's mother, Marcela, noticed there was no response coming from Antonia's room. When Marcela went in, she was met with a horrifying sight. Her daughter was hanging motionless above the floor. Marcela rushed to Antonia but found no signs of life. Stunned by the tragedy, she called for help from neighbors. Family friends assisted in taking down the body and contacted emergency services. Soon after, Antonia's father, Alejandro, spoke to the media, promising to discover the reasons behind his daughter's tragic choice and to pursue justice. Antonia was known for her lively personality and intelligence, indicating that something significant had deeply affected her. The autopsy later confirmed that she had died from self-strangulation. The situation required urgent action. Without waiting for official investigations, Antonia's parents took matters into their own hands and started their own inquiry. They hired private detectives who carefully reconstructed the last days of Antonia's life and discovered the person responsible for her distress. Alejandro and Marcela quickly reported Martin Pradines to the police, suspecting him of being the culprit. Law enforcement officials interviewed Martin multiple times, but he maintained that he did nothing wrong concerning Antonia. He asserted that their relationship was consensual and he denied any involvement in her tragic death. However, detectives had a different viewpoint and gathered evidence that contradicted his statements. The investigation revealed that Martin left Pucón on September 17 around noon with friends, and they intended to return the following day. Once they arrived at their destination, the group hosted a party at a rented house, filled with conversation, laughter, and, of course, alcohol. A few hours before Antonia passed away, she sent a goodbye message to Rodrigo and shared a childhood video in a family chat. In the video, Antonia was dancing and laughing happily, which highlighted how much she longed for her younger self. She realized she could never go back to her previous life. This tragedy has deeply affected everyone. Thanks to Alejandro, who found the courage to share his daughter's story on a national level, Antonia's tragedy began to resonate with the public. Her name appeared on posters, social media hashtags, and even on building walls. Public support has had a big impact. Within a week, several women came forward with similar allegations against Martin. 6 new charges were filed against him, detailing actions he took from 2010 to 2019. Ultimately, Martin was arrested for these crimes. Meanwhile, his family sought to protect their personal information, which had been leaked online. They claimed that their constitutional right to privacy was violated due to numerous insults, aggressive messages, and false information circulating online. The Martin family suspected the Antonia family of being involved in these leaks. On June 12, 2020, the Temuco court granted the Martin family's request, according to which, the Antonia family is not allowed to share any information about the Martin family on social media and to refrain from making damaging posts. The ruling has angered Chileans who feel it unfairly protected Martin. On July 21st, the Antonia family appealed the decision to the Supreme Court, but their appeal was denied. Later that month, the lawyer for Martin filed a request for protective measures for his client. During the same period, he was formally charged with multiple attacks. Public anger in Chile intensified, leading to the investigation being referred to as the Antonia case. This case has come to represent the fight for justice for victims of violence. Many women, having stayed silent for years, started to share their own experiences. On July 22nd, the court decided to change Martin's preventive measure. He was transferred from detention to house arrest, that is, released from custody. The judge clarified that this decision did not reflect the final punishment. Although the prosecutor charged Martin with 5 counts of misconduct, the court only recognized 2 of them. This decision sparked massive protests across the country, with thousands of people taking to the streets in outrage over the halt of investigations into certain matters and the decision to place Martin under house arrest. In response to public outcry, the authorities filed a request with the appeals court. The judiciary acted quickly, revoking the house arrest and rearresting Martin. Later, the same court removed the statute of limitations for 2 cases of intimate violence. Meanwhile, Alejandro, along with feminist organizations, was working on a bill to establish penalties for such crimes. He stressed that everyone should be concerned when a woman is taken away by a man without resistance, particularly if she is intoxicated. He highlighted the necessity of taking action in these situations, as this vulnerability puts women at risk of becoming victims. The investigation progressed, and in February 2021, Martin's phone was found. Forensic analysis revealed that it contained photos of women's underwear, indicating that he took pride in his actions and kept records of them. The police report was extensive, totaling nearly 400 pages, and included statements from victims, witnesses, and people who knew both Martin and Antonia, including childhood acquaintances. Martin's former teacher described him as a bright and cheerful child, although he showed a strong interest in intimate subjects. Some women recalled that he had touched them when they were young, but at the time, no one considered it significant since they were all children. On June 14, 2022, the criminal court in Temuco began hearings that were expected to last over a month. During this time, the prosecution presented evidence, expert testimonies, and witness statements. Video footage clearly showed that Antonia could not control the situation. On August 26, Martin was sentenced to 20 years in prison for crimes related to intimacy and aggressive behavior. However, on December 29, the Supreme Court accepted the defense's appeal, disagreeing with the original verdict, and a new trial was set for spring 2023. On March 16, the defendant's legal team withdrew from case, and public defense took over his case. On April 24, 2024, his second trial began, addressing 5 cases of violence and 2 cases of sexual assault. During the trial, Martin chose to speak and described what happened. He attributed his actions to the severe effects of alcohol. However, prosecutors argued that his drinking with the women made them vulnerable. On July 7, 2023, he was found guilty. The federal prosecution requested a 41-year prison sentence for Martin Pardines. On July 28, 2023, the 31-year-old was sentenced to 17 years in prison for 7 offenses related to sexual intimacy involving 6 victims. After accounting for the time he had already spent in custody, he would serve 14 years. The tragic case of Antonia highlighted the danger posed by Martin. It remains unclear how many other innocent women may have been affected by his actions. The line between harassment and flirting is very thin, and one can never anticipate when someone might cross that dangerous boundary. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Crystal Perry. Crystal Perry was born on August 23, 1963, in Rumford, Maine, a small town in the United States. As the youngest of 10 children, her parents faced great challenges in providing for their large family. In difficult circumstances, Crystal and her siblings grew up quite independently, with her parents being too busy to look after all the children. Fortunately, Crystal's older sister, who was only 12 years old when Crystal was born, took on the role of mother and looked after her younger brothers and sisters. Growing up in such a difficult environment, they all wanted to start their own lives as soon as possible, so her siblings lived in different cities and states. Crystal also dreamed of starting a family. While in high school, she met Tom and they eventually got married. Initially, they moved to California, but Crystal soon realized that city life was not for her. After a year and a half, they decided to return to Maine and settled in Bridgeton, a small town about an hour away from Crystal's hometown. The quaint town is famous for being the setting of Stephen King's novel, The Mist. Crystal worked at a local shoe store, while Tom held various part-time jobs. Later, Crystal found out she was pregnant and they welcomed their daughter, Sarah. Although Tom initially wanted to be a father, his relationship with Crystal became complicated after their daughter was born. He began spending more and more time at a local bar, wasting almost all of their money on alcohol. At one point, he even took all of Crystal's savings to buy groceries, leaving them without food. The financial burden of Tom's drinking problem became too much for their relationship, and Crystal eventually decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, Tom still visited his daughter occasionally, but he was not actively involved in her life. The situation became worse when Tom started dating someone new and his girlfriend began harassing Crystal, constantly calling and threatening her, visiting her house and causing chaos in public, all because she could not accept Crystal's previous marriage to Tom. Crystal was hesitant about Sarah visiting her father because she was worried that his new girlfriend could endanger Sarah's safety. After her parents' divorce, Crystal moved in with her mother. She spent years saving money, and finally, she was able to buy her own house. The house was located in the suburb of Bridgeton, near a peaceful lake and a forest. Crystal and Sarah were delighted to finally have a place they could call their own. Crystal grew up in a large family, so when she had her own daughter, she gave her as much time, attention, and love as she could. After a long day at work, Crystal and her daughter, Sarah, would often rent a movie or just talk for hours. One evening, on May 10, 1994, when Crystal was 30 and Sarah was 12, they watched the solar eclipse together. The next day went as usual. Crystal went to work and Sarah went to school. That evening, they had dinner and Crystal put Sarah to bed. A few hours later, Sarah woke to the sound of her mother screaming. At first, she thought Crystal was on the phone, arguing with someone. However, she quickly realized the situation was much more serious. Crystal's screams were loud and frantic, making Sarah think someone was attacking her mother. With the bedroom door ajar, Sarah mustered up the courage to approach, despite her mounting fear. She moved closer to the door, and as she listened, she realized the scream was coming from the kitchen. However, from where she stood, Sarah couldn't see what was happening. Sarah was terrified, not daring to move or make a sound, afraid of revealing her location. Then she heard footsteps, and her heart sank as she assumed that her mother's attacker was now coming for her. In a desperate attempt to escape, she hid behind the bed and waited anxiously for the door to open. However, instead of the door, she heard the sound of a kitchen drawer sliding open, followed by the sound of someone rummaging through utensils. Her mother's continuous screams and desperate pleas for forgiveness filled the house, and in the next few seconds, Sarah heard what sounded like someone had started stabbing her mother with a knife. With each brutal stab, her mother's cries grew fainter and fainter until they strangely stopped. Gathering her courage, Sarah finally left the room and went to the kitchen. What she saw was a horrifying sight. The only light came from the moon shining through the window, as the kitchen lights were off. The clock on the wall read 1 a.m. When she entered the kitchen, she saw her mother lying on the floor in a large pool of blood that covered the entire floor. Despite her shock, Sarah knew she had to call for help immediately. Next to her mother's hand was a phone. Sarah quickly picked up the phone and dialed 911, but she only received complete silence on the other end of the line. She then ran to Crystal's room to try the second phone. But unfortunately, it didn't work either. Despite trying several times and getting the same result, Sarah realized that she had only one option left: to seek help from the neighbors. Braving the cold of the May night in only her pajamas and bare feet, Sarah ran out of the house and into the street. Her main concern was to find someone to help her injured mother. She started running to the nearest house, about half a mile away, towards the center of the city. However, when she knocked repeatedly, no one answered. Undeterred, Sarah continued to run to other nearby houses, knocking on each door, but still no one answered. Finally, after several attempts at many houses, Sarah arrived at a local Italian restaurant, whose owner lived in the adjacent building. She knocked desperately and finally got an answer. The owner, shocked by Sarah's panicked state, let her in and listened as she explained the urgency of the situation. Her mother had been attacked and she desperately needed help. Sarah then called 911 herself and reported what had happened. The police immediately arrived at their home. When they examined the front door glass, they discovered a fingerprint, which they quickly identified as Sarah's. A thorough search of the crime scene found no other fingerprints. However, the kitchen floor revealed several bloody shoe prints. Police took photographs to determine the size and style of the shoes, suspecting they belonged to the killer. The shoe prints led to Sarah's bedroom but mysteriously stopped at the entrance, as if the killer had returned without entering the room. Police noticed two unusual details at the crime scene. It was clear that the killer had tried to wipe some of the blood off the floor. However, it was clear that the killer could not remove all of the blood, as there was blood everywhere. However, there were also other drops that fell to the floor at right angles, and judging by the splatters from a greater height, the police speculated that the killer had injured himself during the murder, and that the blood was theirs. This theory was reinforced by the discovery of a trail of blood leading to a roll of tissue paper, but there were no remaining rolls nearby. It is possible that the killer used the tissue paper to stop the bleeding after being injured during the murder, and then immediately left the crime scene. Medical experts discovered more than 50 stab wounds on Crystal's body, indicating that this was a violent and intentional attack. The murder weapon, later determined to be a kitchen knife, was not found at the scene, suggesting that the killer had taken it with them when they left. During this process, a piece of the knife broke off and was embedded in Crystal's body, further highlighting the force used. Additional testing revealed that Crystal had been sexually assaulted, allowing experts to collect DNA and blood samples from the perpetrator. Despite this crucial evidence, the investigation was plagued by unexpected delays. Due to a lack of funding, the local lab was overwhelmed, so it would take at least 6 months to get the results. This forced the police to begin their investigation without any concrete evidence. Initially, the police ruled out a robbery, as nothing appeared to have been missing from the house. They also noted that there were no signs of forced entry, leading them to conclude that the perpetrator was likely someone Crystal knew, as she likely opened the door for them. Since she was wearing pajamas at the time of the incident, it is unlikely that she was waiting for guests, leading police to speculate about a potential relationship between Crystal and her attacker. The police have two main theories about the case. Crystal knew the killer and let them in willingly, or the killer was a stranger who knocked on the door and tricked Crystal into opening the door. To gather more information, the police decide to start by questioning the only witness, Sarah. At the hospital, where Sarah is being checked, The police ask her why she ran to a neighbor's house for help instead of calling 911 from her own home. Sarah explains that she couldn't use her phone because it wasn't working, but the investigation finds this explanation suspicious, as both Sarah's and Crystal's phones were working properly when checked by the police at the crime scene. Police believe Sarah may have become confused due to the stress of the situation. Initially, they considered the possibility that the first phone was inoperable, as the first caller had turned off her phone and needed to reset it to make another call. As for the second phone, they did not rule out the possibility that Sarah may have dialed the wrong number in her haste or that the phone line may have been temporarily disconnected due to the rain. As the investigation continued, the police asked Sarah if she had seen the killer. Sarah replied that she had been in her bedroom during the incident. However, the police were a little skeptical of her story and asked how she knew her mother had been attacked with a knife. Sarah's explanation was that it was obvious. But the police continued to press her. They felt that she might be withholding some information and that she had actually seen the killer. In the 3 days after the murder, the police interviewed Sarah 18 times. They hoped her story would change, but she stuck to her original account of events. Then the police found their first important clue. A local shoe store had a pair of boots with soles that matched the bloody footprints found at the scene. They also discovered that Crystal had been harassed by Teresa, the girlfriend of her ex-husband Tom. Although the killer was clearly a man, the police decided to investigate Teresa because she had repeatedly threatened to kill Crystal. Teresa may have had someone help her commit the crime, but the police did not find any evidence to support this idea. During their investigation, they discovered that Crystal was in a relationship with a man named Dennis at the time of her death. The two had met 2 years before Dennis started working at the shoe store where Crystal worked. They began dating soon after and eventually became engaged, although they never married. The police found that their relationship was strained, with frequent arguments between the couple and Dennis sometimes engaging in aggressive behavior, such as breaking things and punching walls. However, the police did not find any evidence that he had ever harmed Crystal. The day after the murder, the police came to Dennis's house. When he opened the door, they asked him if he had left the night before or if he had seen Crystal. Dennis immediately responded by asking if Crystal was dead, and he passed out shortly after. After regaining consciousness, Dennis began answering the police's questions. He explained that he had originally planned to visit Crystal that evening, but he had been late for work because he had helped a friend fix his car. When he finally returned home, he called Crystal, but she told him it was too late to visit. This led to an argument and Dennis stayed home. Although the police could not be 100% sure that he was telling the truth, they were able to verify that he had helped his friend fix his car that evening. Dennis also voluntarily took a lie detector test, which the police found no signs of lying. Although the police noticed that he had the same shoe size as the killer, they did not find any matching shoes in Dennis's home. He agreed to provide a DNA sample, but he asked the police to do him a favor, saying that if they decided to arrest him, they should enter his workplace through the back door to avoid disturbing others. He explained that his boss had always treated him well and he did not want to disrupt work. During the investigation, the police contacted Crystal's best friend, who lived in another town. This friend shared a disturbing conversation she had had with Crystal just a few weeks earlier. In the story, Crystal expressed fear for Dennis. Their arguments escalated and Dennis became increasingly aggressive. Crystal considered ending the relationship but hesitated for fear of Dennis's reaction. The police then went to Crystal's workplace to further question her coworkers, but were unable to gather any useful information. As soon as the police left Crystal's workplace, Dennis entered and began asking what the coworkers had told the police. Despite the police's efforts, no evidence was found to implicate Dennis, and had to wait months for the DNA results, so they continued to search for other potential leads. This led them to a local man named Donnie, who had gotten drunk at a party and started bragging about killing Crystal. During the investigation, police brought Donnie in for questioning. However, the man claimed that he had no memory of attending a party and denied any involvement in the murder. Police later discovered that Donnie was an alcoholic and a notorious liar. In another development, a witness reported seeing a black pickup truck with New Hampshire plates near Crystal's neighborhood, but this lead ultimately went unanswered. Another witness came forward describing an incident in which she drove past Crystal's house on the night of the murder. She recalled hearing sirens, assuming they were related to her boyfriend, who lived down the street and was a frequent troublemaker. At the same time, she saw a car with headlights following her at high speed. Thinking that the driver was chasing her, she turned onto another street. However, the car passed her. Police have not been able to confirm whether the car was related to Crystal's murder. The investigation is still ongoing, and they have had difficulty finding any concrete evidence. In an effort to get the case back on track, Crystal's family has offered a $10,000 reward for any information and has posted flyers around town to attract potential witnesses. However, Crystal's ex-husband's girlfriend, Teresa, has been seen repeatedly tearing up these flyers. Crystal's ex-husband, Tom, was investigated thoroughly, but police eventually ruled him out as a suspect. He was an alcoholic and had become worse over the years, leaving him almost drunk. In this state, it seemed impossible for him to commit such a crime, and he had no apparent motive. The police investigated two other men Crystal had dated after her divorce, but found no connection between them and the crime. All the men, including Tom, provided DNA samples. The police waited for the test results, which took 9 months. When they did, they showed that the blood and semen samples did not match any of the suspects, including Dennis. With no new leads, the police requested a DNA sample from Dennis again for further testing, but the results remained the same. With no progress, they decided to re-interview their only witness, Sarah. They still believed that she was lying to them, or that her mind had blocked out the horrific memories of her mother's murder and that she had actually seen the killer. To investigate further, they traveled to Texas, where Sarah was living with her aunt, and took a polygraph test. The results showed no deception on Sarah's part. However, the police continued to interrogate her over and over again, asking the same questions. But she repeatedly insisted that she had not seen the killer. Ultimately, the case remained unsolved for years, with police continuing to interview witnesses and potential suspects, but without any significant breakthroughs. In the late 1990s, the FBI DNA database became available, allowing police to upload a DNA sample of Crystal's killer. However, no match was found. A new police officer took over the case in 1999, determined to review all the available evidence and collect more DNA samples from men in the town and surrounding areas. Advances in laboratory technology allowed for faster testing, and hundreds of samples were collected. Unfortunately, none of these samples matched the killer's DNA. The police also asked Sarah to work with a psychologist to explore the possibility of recovering repressed memories of the crime. Sarah agreed, but the psychologist concluded that her claim of not seeing the perpetrator was true and that she had not actually repressed any memories. Years passed, and despite the police's continued efforts, the case remained unsolved due to a lack of new leads. The case took a surprising turn in 2006 when police received news of a DNA match. A DNA sample entered into an FBI database matched blood and semen found at Crystal's crime scene. The DNA belonged to Michael Hutchinson, a man who had never been investigated or suspected in the case. Further investigation revealed that in 2003, Michael had been arrested and convicted of assault with a weapon, resulting in a 6-month prison sentence followed by 3 years of probation, during which time his DNA was collected. A DNA sample from Michael was initially collected but not uploaded to the FBI database and remained on file at the lab. Years later, Michael was arrested for driving drunk with a child in the car. After being released on bail, he failed to appear in court and was subsequently sent to jail. On the day of his wedding, Michael was arrested and taken into custody. A new DNA sample was taken from him, and this time, it was uploaded to the database immediately. Soon after, the police on Crystal's case received a match. They informed Sarah of the development but asked her to keep it a secret until formal charges were filed. The police also asked Sarah if she knew the suspect, and she said no. With Michael in custody, the police began to slowly build their case to ensure that the suspect had no chance of escaping punishment. They discovered that at the time of the murder, Michael lived in Bridgeton, just 2 miles from Crystal's home. Michael was 19 and lived near the Italian restaurant where Sarah called the police. Since Michael frequently visited his mother's house, just a short distance from Crystal's home, the police suspected that Michael may have seen Crystal on several occasions. The police visited Michael in prison and asked him about the murder, but Michael denied any involvement and claimed that he did not know Crystal. However, the police were skeptical of Michael's story, as his DNA was found on Crystal's body and his blood was found at the crime scene. While in custody, the police made an interesting observation about Michael. He had a large scar on the palm of his hand, which appeared to match the wound that Crystal's killer may have suffered during the murder. Although the scar alone was not enough to prove Michael guilty in court, the presence of his DNA firmly linked him to the crime. He was later charged with murder. The prosecution presented evidence that Michael, a user of illegal drugs, had frequently passed by Crystal's house, and that on the fateful night he decided to attack her. But he refused to plead guilty, so it is impossible to know how it all happened. But with the evidence available, the outcome was clear: Michael attacked and killed Crystal. During the trial, an explanation was also sought for the killer not leaving any fingerprints at the crime scene, as Michael worked as a bricklayer. Over time, people who do this work often have worn and torn patterns on their palms, making it impossible for them to leave fingerprints on the surface. In his testimony, Michael stated that he met Crystal at a bar and they went back to her place, where they had consensual sex. A man in a black motorcycle jacket broke into the house, attacked Michael, and killed Crystal. Michael regained consciousness and tried to fight off the attacker, but he was injured in the hand and the attacker escaped. However, Michael then left the crime scene without a valid reason, which raised doubts about his story. There were several inconsistencies, including the fact that the only shoe prints at the scene were Michael's, suggesting that if his testimony was true, the intruder would have had to remove his shoes before entering, which is highly unlikely. Additionally, there were no other signs of a break-in or struggle at the scene. The trial ended on April 9, 2007, with a guilty verdict for Michael. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Michael remains incarcerated to this day. The traumatic event of her mother's murder had a profound impact on Sarah. However, over time, she found the strength to rebuild her life. Sarah pursued further education, pursued a writing career, and eventually published a book chronicling her mother's murder, compiling all the available information. Furthermore, while writing the book, Sarah discovered new facts about the case that the police had overlooked. She discovered that Michael often borrowed his father's car, a black Ford pickup with New Hampshire license plates. This information was important because a witness had previously reported seeing a similar car near Crystal's house on the night of the murder. Another witness also reported seeing a car with its high beams speeding past her house that night. She initially thought the police were headed for her boyfriend's house because she mistook the sirens of an ambulance for police sirens. The woman's boyfriend was revealed to be Michael. The police had recorded his name and address in the report. However, they did not investigate him further at that time. Had the police investigated him further, they might have discovered the cut on his hand, potentially solving the case sooner. Unfortunately, past events cannot be changed. Hello again, true crime fans. we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Grace Mill Lane. Grace Emmy Rose Mill Lane was born on December 2, 1996, in Wickford, Essex, to Gillian and David Mill Lane. She is the youngest of 3 siblings and is known as a loving, outgoing, fun-loving, family-oriented, creative, and artistic girl. The family is very close, so Grace keeps in touch with her siblings and parents every day, even while studying advertising and marketing at Lincoln University, where she is living away from home. In 2018, 21-year-old Grace Mill Lane graduated with a BA in advertising and marketing. Like many young people her age, Grace decided to take a year off before settling down in her career to celebrate the completion of her university degree. She chose to take a year off to travel around South America before going to New Zealand to tour. In October 2018, Grace embarked on a 10-month solo adventure. First, she traveled to Peru. Then, on November 19th, Grace arrived in New Zealand and checked into the base backpackers hostel in Auckland, preparing for a 2-week stay on the North Island. During her time in New Zealand, Grace met a 28-year-old man named Jesse Kempson, whom she had matched with on Tinder. Jesse was born on December 28, 1991, in Lower Hutt, New Zealand. He grew up in Wellington. As a child, his parents divorced, and he was raised by his grandparents for a time. As a teenager, he moved to Australia with his mother. However, in 2016, he returned to New Zealand and lived in a hostel in Wellington. Little did Grace know that Jesse had a dark side. He was known to be very charismatic, using his charm to manipulate others. Jesse struggled to keep a job or a place to live for long due to his constant lying. On one occasion, he lied to his former landlord, claiming to be a newly signed professional baseball player with the New Zealand national baseball team, the Black Sox. He pretended that his contract money would soon be transferred to pay rent. This deception lasted for 2 months until the landlord confirmed with Black Sox management that they had no idea who he was. Unfortunately, the landlord also learned that Jesse had run away without warning, costing him over $1,700. On multiple occasions, Jesse claimed to have a bachelor's degree in international law, that he came from a millionaire family wanting to buy a top restaurant in Auckland, and that he had connections in the New Zealand Immigration Department, among other lies. However, the truth is that Jesse is simply a delusional person, only able to impress others with his wild fabrications. His former roommates at Green Lane found him creepy and untrustworthy before he moved into City Life apartments. A woman he lived with claimed that he stole money from her house and then ran away. This cost the landlord at City Life thousands of dollars after Jesse lied about receiving a monthly salary and not paying rent. Jesse is a mystery to many. He often lies and frequently gets away with it. Back in the hostel where Grace was staying, she was happily conversing with Jesse. She was charmed by Jesse, even sending a text to her close friend Anna back home, telling her that she clicked with this guy. As her 22nd birthday was the next day, she decided to meet Jesse, who lived nearby, to get to know him better. On the day they were supposed to meet, Grace was preparing for her big party, feeling excited and optimistic about the evening ahead. She left the base backpackers hostel in Auckland at 6 p.m. and walked into the city center in a black dress, holding a small handbag, unaware that she was about to encounter a tragic event. The evening went off without a hitch as they went to a local bar and left together around 9:30 p.m. The next day was Grace's 22nd birthday, and her family and friends tried to contact her to congratulate her, but Grace did not respond, causing concern and panic among her family members. Grace had kept her family updated about her trip, providing them with details and photos. However, her family contacted Auckland police and reported Grace missing. Initially, detectives did not suspect Grace of any wrongdoing. They knew that Grace had not returned to her hostel on the night of December 1st and thought she might be staying with some new friends. They quickly searched for Grace on the night of her disappearance, using CCTV cameras across the city, and identified the mystery man with whom Grace had been seen that night as Jesse. That evening, Jesse met Grace. Before the appointment, he had gone to a local bar called the Bluestone Room, which was next to the City Life Hotel where he was staying. About half an hour before meeting Grace, Jesse was seen drinking 4 beers there, a lone figure in a pub further down Mill Lane. Meanwhile, Grace was waiting at the foot of the Sky Tower, where they had agreed to meet. This shows her anticipation of possibly starting a romantic relationship during the holiday. The Sky Tower is one of the most recognizable icons of New Zealand's largest city, dominating the skyline and serving as the focal point for many events. Most importantly, it is a public place where Grace would feel safer meeting someone. When Jesse arrived, the two recognized each other immediately. He hugged her as she smiled and walked toward him. The first place they visited was a burger restaurant and bar located on the first floor of the Sky City complex. During their time in Sky City, their every move was recorded by cameras. They were recorded as they went up the escalator to Andy's Burger and Bar, where they ordered cocktails and then sat together at a table to chat. About an hour and a half later, they left the bar and went to a nearby restaurant called the Mexican Cafe. After drinking 2 margaritas and a pitcher of sangria, they left the restaurant and went to the Bluestone Room, where Jesse had been drinking alone earlier. At 8:40 p.m., Jesse pulled Grace close to him and kissed her for about a second. In the next scene, they continued to kiss. Jesse then left, and Grace checked her phone, sending a final text message to her friend Anna. Grace then also left. Jesse used Grace's phone to post a message on her Facebook profile, saying she was beautiful and radiant. After around 9:30 p.m., the footage shows them leaving from the other side and going to the Mill Lane lobby of the City Life Hotel, then entering the elevator. Jesse searched for his key card as they headed toward room 308. It is unclear exactly what happened in room 308 after they arrived. However, by around 1:30 a.m., Grace had died in her room. It was confirmed that Grace never left the building, and Jesse did not call emergency services or any other assistance when she died. After Grace died, Jesse conducted several internet searches that demonstrated he was not only unconcerned about her death but was actively planning to cover it up. The next morning, after Grace had died in room 308, the man messaged another woman he had met on Tinder, trying to arrange a date for later that day. He was then caught on CCTV moving from his room to an entertainment outlet to buy a suitcase, then to a supermarket to buy some toiletries. He subsequently rented a red Toyota, and while Grace was still lying dead in the hotel room, he went out in the afternoon to meet the woman he had messaged earlier that day at a bar called The Dry in the upscale Auckland suburb of Ponsonby. The woman, who was a former reporter, appeared calm when she met Jesse at The Dry. During their conversation, he mentioned that all his friends were police officers and that a close friend was about to move to New Zealand to become a prosecutor. As they discussed a murder case she had worked on, he commented that it was a shame men could make mistakes and face long sentences. He then went on to talk about a man who had asked his girlfriend to have sex in a rough manner, which resulted in her death, making the woman feel uncomfortable. Jesse continued to lie throughout the conversation, making her increasingly uneasy. When she left the bar, although she felt very nervous, Jesse later texted her asking for another date, but she declined. After he returned to his room at around 5:45 p.m. on December 2nd, he rented a carpet cleaning device called the Rug Doctor to clean the carpet, under the pretext of removing red wine stains. After parking his rental car outside the hotel, he took a cart from the front desk, went upstairs, and returned with a cart carrying 2 large suitcases, one of which was identical to the one he had purchased earlier. He loaded the suitcases onto the cart and drove to a nearby parking lot. The silver suitcase contained Grace's body, while the second suitcase served as a cover to avoid suspicion. Throughout the day, surveillance cameras recorded him changing his clothes several times. Early the next morning, around 6:15 a.m., Jesse left the hotel and drove away, stopping only to buy a shovel at a store in the suburb. BS. During this time, Grace's parents became concerned because she did not respond to their birthday greetings. 3 days later, Grace's parents reported her missing, and a massive search was launched. On December 7, 2018, Grace's father, David Millane, arrived in New Zealand and made an emotional appeal for any information regarding his daughter's disappearance. Jesse was questioned as a suspect individual after Grace's mother discovered a message he had left on her Facebook page at 9:29 p.m. on December 1, just 11 minutes before they left the Bluestone room and went to his room. Detective Diana Levinson first questioned Jesse. He claimed that he had met Grace and parted ways with her at 10 p.m. on Saturday, which he stated was the last time he had seen her. However, detectives obtained CCTV footage from the hotel, proving that he had lied. During his second interview, he had no choice but to admit to killing Grace. However, he claimed that she had died accidentally during sex after he asking him to strangle her in an attempt to enhance their experience. Following the questioning, he was arrested, and police took Grace's body to the hospital. Grace's body was found around 4 p.m. on December 9 and buried on Scenic Drive in Waitakere Ranges Regional Park. A post-mortem examination was conducted in relation to Grace's death. It found that Grace had been strangled and had bruises on her body, indicating that she had been restrained. The murder trial took place in Auckland on November 4, 2019. Jesse attempted to explain Grace's death as an accident following a fight that went wrong, but the jury rejected his claim and found him guilty. Jesse, aged 28, was convicted of murder on November 22, 2019. During his trial, he was described as a man whose behavior was so pathological that some of the women he met or communicated with on Tinder felt very uncomfortable. It was later discovered that, before meeting Grace, he had taken another British tourist on a Tinder date and brought her to his hotel room in Auckland 8 months earlier. At the age of 21, Jesse sexually assaulted a tourist. When she refused to have sex with him, she cried and froze in fear. She kept the attack a secret until she recognized Jesse from media reports on the day he was charged with Grace's murder. A woman who had been communicating with him online became cautious about meeting him. She shared a series of messages in which he detailed his sexual preferences and admitted why he enjoyed them. It is speculated that Jesse's desire to dominate contributed to Grace's death. In a separate trial, he was convicted of assaulting his former partner. For months, he used violence, threatened her with a knife, and forced her to perform humiliating acts after telling her he had been sent by the CIA to kill her. Jesse refused to admit guilt and showed no remorse. On February 21, 2020, Jesse was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 17 years. Grace's story has raised awareness about the importance of safety for travelers, especially young women, when exploring the world. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Wilma Anderson. Wilma Anderson was born to Linda and Marcus Anderson after her parents divorced. Wilma moved in with her older sister Emily. Despite this difficult situation, Wilma's mother remained closely involved in her life. According to her mother Linda, Wilma was an active and ambitious girl who loved to socialize with people. She loved social media, often sharing photos of her life on Facebook, and enjoyed every opportunity to be captured in photos. At the age of 15, Wilma met Tishko Ahmed Shirzad, 20, in Sweden. Wilma's mother was concerned about her daughter dating someone older, but she trusted Wilma's choice and eventually accepted their relationship. Tishko, who is originally from Iraq, moved to Sweden at the age of 8 to live with her father and stepmother. He became a Swedish citizen in 2014 and eventually found a job in the care industry after completing his studies in 2018. Wilma and Tishko's relationship took a significant step forward when they moved in together in Uddevalla, Sweden. At first, things went smoothly, but over time, their relationship changed and became increasingly troubled. Tishko began to become more controlling, which Wilma's mother noticed, a change in her daughter's behavior during the 2 years Wilma lived with Tishko. Wilma often spoke to her sister Emily about the problems she was having with Tishko. On November 14, 2019, Wilma spoke to Emily on the phone when she went to Tishko's apartment to collect her belongings. During the call, Wilma expressed her intention to end her relationship with Tishko, citing his excessive control over her life. She felt suffocated by his behavior, dictating what she wore, where she went, who she saw, and even how she applied her makeup. Feeling suffocated by his domineering and abusive behavior, she had had enough and just wanted it to end. When Tishko returned home from work, Wilma ended the call. Emily then tried to contact Wilma, but she was unable to reach her. The next day, November 15th, Wilma missed a scheduled dentist appointment. 2 days later, on November 17th, Wilma's parents visited the apartment she shared with her boyfriend. After knocking on the door, a moment later, the door slowly opened and they saw Tishko. Linda was worried and asked Tishko where Wilma was. Tishko told them that he and Wilma had broken up and that she had left after packing her things. He claimed that he did not know where she was and did not expect to see her again. Linda and her husband went into the apartment to try to find out more information by talking to Tishko. Tishko told them what had happened that night, saying that he and Wilma had gotten into a big argument when he got home from work at 5:30 p.m., which ended with Wilma leaving him. Wilma's parents were not too concerned about her absence at first, as her relationship with Tishko was often argumentative and unstable. However, Wilma's sister, Emily, became increasingly concerned and turned to Facebook for help. In her post, Emily explained that Wilma had been missing since November 14th and had not contacted her family, which was unusual for her. Emily described Wilma as being 165 centimeters tall with black hair with blonde highlights. She stressed that this disappearance was out of character for Wilma and expressed her deep concern for her sister's safety. The police were involved, taking a report and starting to collect statements from family and friends. Their goal was to reconstruct her recent activities and interactions. They interviewed those who had last seen or spoken to her. Linda and Emily confirmed that they had not had contact with Wilma since November 14th, noting that their attempts to call her had gone unanswered. A search party was organized, combining the efforts of the police with those of her friends and family, using dogs and drone technology to scan inaccessible areas for any traces. When police questioned Tishko, he denied knowing where Wilma was and said he had not heard from her recently. By Sunday, November 17th, 3 days after Wilma went missing, there was still no sign of her. This was especially worrying because Wilma, who posted frequently on social media, had been completely inactive for an unusually long period of time. The situation became more urgent, prompting some 5,000 people to join the search for her. Police continued to question Tishko, seeking more information, but he maintained that he had no knowledge of Wilma's whereabouts. He claimed that after they broke up, she had moved on to someone else. However, there was no evidence to support this, leaving her loved ones confused and worried. At the same time, Wilma's family revealed a heartbreaking story to the police, lamenting how their daughter's life had taken a drastic turn since she became involved with Tishko, creating a bleak contrast to her once vibrant and sociable self. Linda revealed that Tishko had complete control over her, constantly telling her what to do and monitoring her every move. Emily shared some disturbing information that Wilma had told her. It was clear that Tishko had become violent in their relationship. Despite the abuse, Wilma still had strong feelings for Tishko. Tishko's level of control was so extreme that he even attached a GPS tracking device to Wilma's phone, allowing him to know her location at all times. A series of text messages between Wilma and Tishko revealed a disturbing control in their relationship. An exchange from a previous argument showed that Wilma had asked Tishko to contact her when he felt he could trust her. As part of the investigation, police looked into Tishko's alibi for the time. Tishko claimed he had been in the apartment after returning from work at 5 p.m. To verify this, police tracked Tishko's movements using GPS tracking on his phone. Surveillance footage showed Tishko at the supermarket at 2:30 p.m. on the day Wilma went missing. He returned home from work at 5 p.m. Around 6 p.m., neighbors reported a loud and escalating argument between the couple, louder than their usual disagreements. A concerned neighbor decided to check on them but was met with an unsettling silence as they approached the apartment door. The sudden silence was unnerving, and the neighbor, not knowing what to do, returned to their apartment. Police continued to investigate Wilma's disappearance, carefully analyzing Tishko's activities. They expanded their search to his workplace and company vehicle, requesting forensic analysis. The car's GPS showed that he had been traveling from Thursday, the 14th, to Monday, the 18th. The GPS log showed that he visited clients and returned home during his regular work hours on those days. On the day of the dispute, Tishko's phone showed that he left his apartment at 6:30 p.m. Witnesses saw him walking along the highway, alone and dressed all in black. A motorcyclist described Tishko as deep in thought about something. Tishko was stopped by police and taken home. When questioned, Tishko said he had initially wanted to catch a train, but then changed his mind and walked home. Curiously, the police did not file a report after the encounter. On November 19, 2019, while the investigation was still ongoing, police noticed that he had visible scratches on his forearms. After obtaining a search warrant for his apartment, police found several of Wilma's belongings, including a handbag, jacket, shoes, and eyeglasses. Wilma's mother, Linda, said her daughter always carried the bag with her, making the discovery even more suspicious. Police examined the scene with Blue Star, a high-tech version of luminol. The results revealed ominous bloodstains on the walls and floors throughout the apartment, suggesting a violent struggle. As police reconstructed the events, a chilling story began to emerge. Bloodstains stretched from the living room to the bedroom, suggesting something, or someone, had been dragged. Even the bed bore a dark imprint, a haunting shape of a torso highlighted by the bright light of the Blue Star. Police also discovered muscle tissue on a knife and blood splatter on the living room wall. The large amount of blood found at the scene indicated a violent incident, making the possibility of survivors very low. When police searched outside the apartment, they discovered trash bags containing Tishko's bed sheets with blood stains on them. When questioned at the police station, Tishko denied knowing anything about the blood stains and said he would have noticed if there had been more blood in his house. As the search for Wilma continued, more and more people joined in, hoping to find her and provide a glimmer of hope amid the growing tragedy. The apartment where Wilma was last seen became a grim crime scene, but attempts to find her were unsuccessful. On November 28, 2 weeks after Wilma went missing, police brought in sniffer dogs to help search the crime scene. These specially trained dogs can detect the scent of a dead person. When they entered the bedroom, one of the dogs quickly indicated that there was a possibility of a corpse or human remains. The apartment was also filled with a distinct and unpleasant odor. Although the police had searched the bedroom before, they searched thoroughly again, focusing on the area the dogs had marked. They focused on a dresser, which appeared to be just another piece of furniture in the room, but inside the otherwise innocuous dresser was a small travel suitcase, which seemed inconspicuous among the other items in the room. After opening it, they discovered a large object wrapped in kitchen foil inside the suitcase. When they opened the foil, they were met with a horrifying and heartbreaking truth. Wilma's severed head had been carefully wrapped and tied with tape inside the foil. The travel case, containing evidence of Wilma's horrific events, was sent to the Gothenburg Forensic Laboratory for further examination. A detailed examination revealed Tishko's fingerprints, which linked him to the heinous act. The investigation revealed the shocking brutality of the crime. Although pathologists were unable to determine Wilma's exact cause of death, they discovered severe injuries to her head and eyes caused by blunt force trauma. The decapitation had also caused further head injuries. Wilma's family was devastated by her news. Her mother, Linda, joined the search efforts for the rest of Wilma's body. The family was confronted with horrifying details of the case, including evidence found on the walls of the apartment. It became clear that Wilma's final moments may have taken place in the living room, where she was violently attacked. A severe blow to the head ended her life, leaving a haunting reminder of the violence. Swedish police filed a report detailing Tishko's denial of Wilma's murder, strongly asserting his innocence. Despite Tishko's claims, police had enough evidence to charge him with the crime, and his trial was set for May 2020. However, Wilma's body was not found during the trial. Tishko showed no remorse or emotion throughout the investigation. Reports revealed that he had a disturbing view of his ex-girlfriend, associating her with evil and making bizarre claims that she was working with the Democrats against then U.S. President Donald Trump. Tishko's bizarre obsession with the president led him to attempt to join Trump's campaign. But his application was rejected due to incomplete records. During his trial, his defense team attempted to argue that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, citing his bizarre beliefs and statements about Wilma as evidence. However, this defense was unsuccessful. On July 27, 2020, a court found Tishko Ahmed Shirzad, 23, guilty of the murder of 17-year-old Wilma Anderson and sentenced him to life in prison, which was later reduced to 18 years by an appeals court. The inexplicable reduction in sentence stems from the lack of concrete evidence to pinpoint the exact cause of Wilma's death or the course of events, since her body was not there, a haunting absence that leaves important questions unanswered, hindering the pursuit of justice. In 2020, Wilma's funeral marked the sad end to her story, causing immense pain for her family. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Rob Andrew. Brenda Evers was born on December 16, 1963, in Enid, Oklahoma. Her parents were Christians. The family often gathered around the dinner table, prayed together, and participated in church activities. Brenda grew up to be a quiet and calm girl. She did well in school and spent a lot of time at church helping others. While many of her friends were dating, Brenda patiently waited for her ideal partner. While in high school, she cheered for the school's soccer team. Brenda was a moral and humble young woman, just like her mother. She loved to dance but did not go to parties often. Brenda's goal was to be a devoted wife and mother, devoting herself to her family after marriage. At the age of 17, Brenda met Rob Andrew, her friend's older brother. Rob was older and in college. They quickly discovered that they had much in common. Although they were from different branches of Christianity, Brenda was Lutheran and Rob was Baptist. They both held conservative views, attended church regularly, and wanted to raise a large, happy family. Their friendship gradually blossomed into romance. Brenda then went to college in Winfield, Kansas. Despite being 125 miles apart, they tried to keep in touch regularly. To be closer to her lover, Brenda transferred to a college in Stillwater, Oklahoma, a year later. By the end of the summer of 1984, they married. Not long after, Rob received an attractive job offer in Houston, Texas. Although he was hesitant, Brenda convinced her husband to accept it. While Rob developed his career as an advertising executive, Brenda also completed her degree and found a job in the banking industry. Brenda loved the bustling life in the big city, with its tall buildings and vibrant nightclubs. Texas changed her a lot. She became more confident, started taking care of herself, dressed fashionably, wore makeup, and made many friends. However, Rob was not happy with these changes. He believed that a woman of faith should be more restrained. In addition, Rob began to feel homesick. So when he received an offer to return to the advertising agency in Oklahoma City, he happily agreed. Brenda did not support her husband's decision, leading to an argument between the two. In the end, they agreed that Rob would move to the new place first, and if everything went well, his wife would follow. After several months of living apart, the family reunited. In the early 1990s, Rob and his wife moved into a luxury home in Landsbrook. 9 months later, they had their first daughter, Tricity. Brenda quit her job to become a stay-at-home mom and raise the children. 4 years later, they had their son, Parker. Their family life seemed perfect, with love, children, home, and wealth. Rob and Brenda were married for approximately 17 years and had 2 children together. As a deeply religious couple, they raised their children with strong faith and moral values. They regularly attended church as a family and participated in charitable activities. From the outside, their marriage appeared happy and stable. However, in October 2001, their family life unexpectedly fell apart when Brenda left Rob and initiated divorce proceedings. After that, Rob stopped by their old home to pick up their children for the holidays as planned. That evening, Brenda met him at the door and asked him to fix a broken appliance in the garage. As Rob bent down to check, he heard footsteps behind him. As he turned around, he was shot and fell to the concrete floor. At around 6 p.m., emergency services received a call from Brenda. She reported that she was injured and her husband was dead. An ambulance was dispatched immediately. When paramedics arrived, they found a horrific scene in the garage. A man was lying in a pool of blood, dead from a gunshot wound. His wife, Brenda, had a less serious wound to her arm. Brenda's clothes were covered in blood, and she appeared to be in shock. Paramedics confirmed that she was indeed in shock. Brenda said that she had tried to give Rob first aid, but she thought he was dead. They noticed that the victim's hand was bandaged. After the incident, Brenda was taken to the hospital for treatment. Police began investigating the scene as soon as the ambulance left. They found a .22 caliber bullet in the wall and a shotgun shell casing, indicating that multiple weapons were used. Police also found the victim's wallet intact, ruling out the possibility of a robbery. To clarify the incident, they needed to interview Rob's ex-wife. At the hospital, Brenda explained the reason for her encounter with Rob. She said that while they were together, 2 masked and armed men broke into the garage. The attackers shouted something that Brenda could not hear. One shot Rob twice, and the other shot and wounded Brenda as she tried to run away. Both attackers then fled. Brenda did not know the identity or motive of the attackers. She believed that Rob was unlikely to have enemies because he was kind and helpful. Brenda admitted that she was scared, especially since there were children in the house at the time of the attack. However, Brenda's story was inconsistent. The police suspected that she was not telling the truth, especially when they saw that the children had not packed for the trip. Interviewing neighbors also did not yield any useful information. No one noticed anything unusual that night. To learn more about Brenda and Rob's personal lives, detectives decided to interview people they knew. It turns out that after the birth of their second child, the relationship between Andrew and Brenda became strained. Andrew often complained to friends and pastors that Brenda mistreated him and hated their marriage. In addition, a close family friend commented that the couple's feelings seemed abnormal. Brenda often expressed her feelings openly, even in front of strangers. Rob seemed to love Brenda too much, as he had forgiven her inappropriate behavior for a long time. Family friends all noticed that Brenda had changed significantly. From a normal housewife, she had become a woman with a more liberal lifestyle. These accusations were well-founded and were backed by clear evidence. Brenda seemed to be going through a midlife crisis. Her style of dress changed significantly. From a refined woman, she changed to wearing revealing clothes and wearing too much makeup. Not only that, Brenda also became secretive with her husband. She did not share where she went, who she met, or what she did. Eventually, Rob discovered that his wife was having an affair. In October 1997, Brenda began an extramarital relationship with Rick Nunley, the husband of a friend and former co-worker at a bank in Oklahoma. They dated for a year, then only communicated by phone occasionally. Brenda then began a relationship with James Higgins, a local store owner. At first, James Higgins was attracted to Brenda's style of dress and flirtatiousness. They began seeing each other regularly once or twice a week after Brenda gave him a hotel room key. The relationship lasted about 5 years. During this time, Brenda's husband, Rob, was completely unaware of the affair. However, he realized that their marriage was in trouble. Brenda hardly spoke to or spent time with Rob anymore. Despite this, Rob remained hopeful that things would improve and tried his best to keep his family together. In 2001, Brenda ended her relationship with James Higgins. This decision had nothing to do with her husband or their marriage. Instead, Brenda had gradually fallen into a life of debauchery and vice. 2 years earlier, a Baptist church had been built in Oklahoma City, largely thanks to Rob's contributions. There, Rob became a deacon, and his wife took on the role of Sunday school teacher. Outwardly, their family appeared prosperous and adhered to traditional moral standards. At that time, Brenda still maintained the image of a model wife. She enthusiastically taught the children basic lessons about religion and friendship. At the church, Brenda met James Pavitt, a married part-time teacher and friend of Rob's. Although James was a devout Christian, he was attracted to Brenda's charm. They began seeing each other in the spring of 2001. At first, they kept their relationship secret, but it gradually became more public. Everyone in the church noticed their closeness. Rob suspected his wife of having an affair, and the two had a big argument. When James divorced his wife, Brenda and Rob also decided to divorce. Although Rob still wanted to save the marriage, Brenda was determined to file for divorce. Shortly after this event, a mysterious call was made to Rob's office, and then a serious car accident occurred, believed to be an assassination attempt on him. Rob became suspicious of Brenda and James, so he reported it to the police. Rob did not oppose the divorce and agreed to the custody arrangement for the children. He even supported Brenda financially. So, what was the motive for killing him? The motive was money. James Pavitt, who was also an insurance agent in addition to teaching, had sold Rob an $800,000 insurance policy that summer, with Brenda as the sole beneficiary. As police investigated the attack on Rob's family, they discovered two important things: the relationship between Brenda and James, as well as a problem with the family's car brakes. As the events connected, Brenda's role in her husband's murder became clearer. Finally, the police also found a new suspect. It was Brenda's new lover, James Pavitt. 2 weeks before the garage incident, Rob went to the insurance company to remove his wife, Brenda, from the policy because she was unfaithful. James, the insurance agent, refused, stating that only the beneficiary, Brenda, could make changes to the policy. Not trusting James, Rob checked with the management. The investigation revealed that Brenda and James had attempted to falsify the policy by transferring ownership to Brenda. They had forged Rob's signature and backdated the changes. James's supervisor confirmed to Rob that he was still the owner of the policy and that only the insured could make changes to it. When James learned of this discovery, he was furious, as it led to his dismissal. Investigators learned that Rob had a 16-gauge shotgun when he left the house. During the search of Brenda's house, Brenda did not turn the gun over, and it was not found, which was quite strange. However, when they searched neighbor's house, Judy Gigstad's house, they made an unexpected discovery. A shell casing from the sought-after handgun was found on the bedroom floor, along with several .22 caliber bullets in the Gigstad's attic. The Gigstads were not home at the time of the crime, and there were no signs of forced entry. Gigstad's family confirmed that Brenda had their spare key. In addition, a key piece of evidence came from Joanna Larson, James Pavitt's daughter. On the day of the crime, she lent her father her car with the promise that he would have it repaired. However, when Joanna retrieved the car, she discovered that it had not been repaired and found a .22 caliber bullet inside. When she informed her father, he told her to throw the bullet away. Investigators also discovered that James had purchased a handgun the week before the crime. Therefore, they planned to question James and Brenda. On November 23, Rob's funeral was held. The case was confusing to the victim's family and friends. What was suspicious was that Brenda, her children, and James Pavitt were all absent from the ceremony. This absence worried Rob's relatives and the police. Apparently, those who did not show up had fled, perhaps assuming that the police were searching for the perpetrators. By that time, the suspects had been identified. The autopsy results were released. Brenda's account of the attack differed significantly from the forensic report. As the police had suspected, 2 different weapons were used in the attack. Rob and Brenda's injuries did not match Brenda's description. The first shot at Rob was fired from a distance with a shotgun, while the second shot was fired at close range with a .22 caliber pistol. Brenda's arm was also shot at close range with the same .22. By analyzing the location and shape of the bloodstains on his clothes, it was concluded that Brenda was near Rob when he was shot. The angle of the bloodstains matched the shooter's position, indicating that Brenda herself fired the second shot at Rob. After receiving the autopsy results, Brenda and James were officially declared suspects and wanted. During their escape, James and Brenda eluded the police for many days. The authorities warned the border guards that they might have crossed into another country. However, no trace of them was found. After some time, it became clear that the two had left the country, with the police suspecting they were in Mexico. To catch them, the authorities decided to freeze their bank accounts. Without money, they would eventually be exposed. And sure enough, 3 months later, James contacted his daughter to ask for money. However, he did not expect that his daughter was cooperating with the investigation. Joanna had doubt that her father was involved in the case. It was clear he was hiding something. Thanks to James's call, the investigation discovered the perpetrator's hideout in the city of Cancun. In February 2002, James and Brenda were arrested at the border and turned over to U.S. authorities. They were charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a felony. The children were placed in the care of their grandparents. After their arrest, neither defendant cooperated with the investigation. They pleaded not guilty and spoke only when their attorneys were present. James was the first to appear in court. The prosecution built a thorough case. They presented information about James's past as an Army sniper and his ability to use a gun. His illicit relationship and the plot to murder Rob were also mentioned. His daughter's testimony and physical evidence were presented. Ultimately, the jury found James guilty and sentenced him to death. Brenda's trial was different from James's. Instead of focusing on the details of the case, the prosecutors presented information about Brenda's character and personal life. They called her former lovers to testify, portraying her as unethical and untrustworthy. When questioned about her motive for killing her husband, Brenda claimed innocence and asked to be released if people truly believed her. However, the prosecutors countered by describing her as someone who did not love her husband and killed him for personal gain. To reinforce their argument, the prosecutors presented items from Brenda's suitcase when she fled to Mexico, including lingerie and sex manuals. They questioned whether a grieving widow would act like that. During the trial, the defense team tried to portray Brenda as a victim. They mentioned that she was injured in the attack, but forensic experts determined that she had inflicted the injuries on herself. The defense also produced a confession letter from James, but a handwriting expert confirmed that Brenda had forged the document. A shocking revelation from James's attorney was that Brenda would be the beneficiary of his insurance policy if he died. This suggested that Brenda may have plotted to kill James the same way she did Rob. Or perhaps she hoped to prove her innocence and frame James so that after he was executed, she would still receive the insurance money. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Brenda guilty and sentenced her to death. Both Brenda and James are currently on death row. Brenda has appealed repeatedly but has been unsuccessful. The crimes of Brenda and James were extremely serious. It is worth noting that they claimed to be religious and taught morality to children, which makes the case even more horrifying. Those who preach morality but do not follow it themselves are hypocrites and cruel. Such people cannot be trusted because they do not truly understand and live by moral principles.